Well, there you have it. The defending champions, the host nation, are finally eliminated from the tournament, but not without a few moments in the last 30 to 40 minutes when they would have felt they're still in with it, they're still in with it. Could we still make it via the back door? Sri Lanka were keeping their hopes alive, or was it even the England middle order who were just labouring to it? Australia is a lovely country to go and eat if you're a foodie, but in this case it was the England batsmen who made a complete meal out of what should have been a routine run chase, particularly after you get to 70 in the power play. Yes, if you were 10 for 3 chasing 141, you know it can be a tough uphill task. They played out the spin threat of Mahesh Theekshana early on, and then they really attacked the quicker bowlers to get to 70 and 6, and then it took all of 19.4 overs to just get over the line. That's all they needed. It was not about net run rate, remember. They're now in the semi-finals. They've joined New Zealand, and it's New Zealand first, England second, and all the action shifts to Super Sunday. But for now, let's dwell on Cricbuzz Live. I'm joined by Joy and Michael. Michael, that was at 70 for no loss. You would have been thinking we're going to have a quick show to finish with.
Yeah, it was looking like a quick game of cricket. Full credit to Sri Lanka in those back end overs, very similar to England in the field. It's obviously got harder and harder. The ball gets softer. The pitch starts to chew up a bit more. Those cutters are grabbing a little bit more than they are with the newer ball. You always bowl a bit quicker in the power play. It was a kind of wicket that you need to bowl a bit slower. Sri Lanka should have won that game. In the conditions that they had, batting first, they should have got 160 easily, if not 170. And I think having seen England bat on that wicket second, it would have been plenty. Ben Stokes, I'm always amazed by Ben Stokes. He's not been in great form. He's not been the star player with the bat in hand. But as soon as the pressure is on, Ben Stokes delivers. If you look at his career, every time England have required something, whether it's the Ashes innings at Headingley in 2019, the World Cup final, now here today, Ben Stokes has stepped up to the plate at number 3, 42 from 36 deliveries under the utmost pressure at the end. He's cool. He's got a very calm head when the pressure's on. I reckon, I don't know of any England player in the history of English cricket, and I'm not diminishing, and I'm not saying that we haven't had great players. We've had plenty of them, but I don't remember a player that can play the pressure card with the bat as well as Ben Stokes.
Fair point there. I mean, we were all talking about how the middle order sort of just didn't do the job, but when you have one calm head at one end, and it just seemed from the body language when a new batsman came in, arm around the shoulder, listen, I'm there, let's just get the job done. Only 2 boundaries, but it was not a situation where you needed boundaries.
No, he didn't. And if you look at it, 89 of the total balls England faced, and they faced 118 balls, 89 of those balls were faced by the top 3 batsmen. All the runs, none of the other batsmen even got into double figures. It's all up there, right at the top of the order. That's where they've scored their runs. And I think the big thing about it is that the way they've played, I think the way England played, had they not, the one way of looking at it is what a mess they've made. But the reverse of it is saying that had they not had that big start early, and had they not curbed Sri Lanka, they would have been in a lot more trouble. And I think that's what they did well. When the ball was a bit hard, they took advantage of circumstances. I thought Alex Hales was also absolutely brilliant in the way he played his innings. Because what it did was, even when the run rate, when wickets started falling, they never had to the run rate never went above the 12, 6 and over, 7 and over, 8, maximum 7 and over. And that was what was good for England. They never had that pressure.
Yeah, I mean, one way is, of course, to break up the innings progression in a traditional way. But Michael, if you look at the overall match, the 40 overs, Sri Lanka pretty much had a lot of the 20 overs at the very start and at the very end. And England owned the first 6 overs of their batting and the last 6 overs of their bowling. So those 12 overs won them the game out of the 40.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think, Sri Lanka are just going to rue the fact that they were 25 runs light. And as to their score, batting badly, you thought they were going to get 155, 160, which would have put England under even more pressure. Batting well, they'd have got 180 plus, which would have made England's job so much harder. So I think Sri Lanka were in that dressing room just thinking that was a game they should have won. They had enough moments in the game. Yes, England had the back end of the Sri Lankan batting innings. They had the start of the obviously batting innings themselves. But you get that momentum from the end of the innings. So they finished so well with the ball in hand and restricted Sri Lanka to 25 in those last 5 overs. It gives you a big lift as a batting unit. You're only chasing 140 odd. If they'd have gone out chasing 170, 180, these kind of momentum things change. And I'd have been amazed if England didn't lose an early wicket because of the target, the pressure that those two were under. But when you're only looking at 140 odd and you've got 6 overs of a power play with just 2 players out and it's a rock hard new ball, that's easy pickings for the likes of Buttler and Hales, who were magnificent. Hales in particular, he's just starting to get going. I'm delighted he's back. It was a big call by Robert Key to bring him back in. He's had difficulties with the England white ball side. Obviously missed the World Cup for his own undoing. But I'm really pleased that they've given a player like Alex Hales another chance. And I put on social media that in 2019, Ben Stokes had redemption. It was all about the Ben Stokes redemption. Is this going to be Alex Hales? He's got 2 games now, a semi-final, a final. Can he be the player that takes England to lifting that trophy? And it can be a real great story that Alex Hales has had his difficulties. He'll be the first to admit that. But now he's back in the side and playing great. And England are a better team with him in the side. So that's what it's about for me, getting the players in the side who can win you games of cricket. And England have done that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. Redemption is one thing, but it's the kind of player he is, the kind of start he's given that you need it. Buttler is going to go at one end, but if you can keep it going at both ends, and for much of the part, it was risk-free.
Exactly. I think you're looking at it from a situation where Johnny Bairstow would do that role, Jason Roy would do that role, and what happens is Buttler is not the kind of guy who tees off immediately, even when he's playing with those guys at the other end. He doesn't tee off immediately. So what he does need is somebody else who almost is like an instant starter, who gives that momentum early. And then Buttler sees the ball for a bit and then he starts hitting the ball. If you see, Buttler always takes a couple of overs. And somebody like what Alex Hales did today is exactly so. England didn't miss a step. When Jason Roy, when Johnny Bairstow were not there, you'd think, Bairstow gone, important player out here. Alex Hales has not made them feel that at all. And all it does is it makes England a great problem to have in the future, not just now. Because Alex Hales is pretty young still, and you have Bairstow, Buttler, Alex Hales, all in the mix. I think it's a great problem to have, but full marks to Hales for what he did. Wow. Wow.
There you go.
Who is it? Joy, answer it.
I think that's Alex Hales.
Yeah,
I think that is Hales.
Yeah, all those kind words, he wants to repay them. I think we've had enough time in post the match when they've got the phones back and quick call to Joy to say thank you. But the man who really calmly took them home, Michael started the show by mentioning him. I think we should dwell on Ben Stokes for a little while because it's for 2 reasons. One, of course, it's not that he was setting this tournament on fire. When he was needed, he came to the party, and he was needed even more today with Malan out of the equation. He probably would have walked out, hobbled out if he had to come in right at the end. But assuming there was no Malan, Stokes needed to guide them home.
Yeah, he's just got a gift of playing the big stage. Even with the ball in the field today, he was excellent. You can just see it's his stage. When it gets to the stage that England desperately need something and they desperately need a win as a team, very rarely have I seen Ben Stokes not produce something. And today he was good with the ball, he was good in the field, and he was exceptional with the bat. Just calmness and clear clarity of where he's looking to score, where he's looking to hit the ball, hit one over extra cover off the spinner, which was a magnificent shot quite early in the innings. I thought, he's got his head on because he's not thinking about the big blows. He's just thinking about, just manoeuvring in the gaps and hitting the ball into the space, low-risk cricket shots. That's all that was required from Ben Stokes, having had the great start from that opening partnership. He just had to get England over the line. And it got tricky. It got a little bit messy. It wasn't easy for those middle-order players coming in with the pitch starting to slope. It was almost as the ball was deflated. It was hard to hit. But Ben Stokes just keeps his cool, keeps his composure. And as I said before, I just don't know of an England, and we could probably trigger back through the history books, and there's been many that can play the pressure game really well. But Ben Stokes continuously seems to be there at the end. It's not just about getting a score; it's there at the end, shaking the opponent's hand, having a red inker, and saying, "Yeah, I saw the game right through." And Ben Stokes just does it consistently. He just seems to know exactly what to do when England require a performance to get them over a tricky target, tricky chase when people are panicking around him. he seems to have that clarity of mind just to be able to keep it all very, very simple. It's a remarkable skill.
And the word he used, deflated, I think it almost seems like that's what it was. The Moeen Ali dismissal was a clear example. Looked like it was a routine shot, possibly pushing for a single, and suddenly it just doesn't go anywhere and he's caught. And Livingston going for a shot. And Ben Stokes realized that, and he knew that despite maybe a flamboyant persona, he had to put that persona aside and say, let me play the ugliest possible cricket with a deflated cricket ball.
Yeah, I'm just a teeny weeny bit disappointed with the likes of Liam Livingstone and Harry Brooks because, yes, they are fantastic stroke makers. But there are days when those strokes don't necessarily come off. And I'm saying if you've lost a couple of wickets, they needn't have taken the kind of risks that they did at that point in time. And I think that is something that they look at, and somebody like a Ben Stokes will tell them that, look, you need to not just play the ball, you need to play the match situation. And in that match situation, they needn't have taken the kind of risks they did. And I think that's where Ben Stokes is so far ahead. His match understanding is so clear. His clarity of thought is so much more. And that is what took England through. And, if you watch the videos, even when the other batsmen got out, there's this one look of exasperation and, sort of shrug from Ben. And then you say, okay, fine. He's understood. By the time the other batsman comes, he's regained his composure. He's sort of saying, relax, cool. This is an easy chase. There's just 6 or 7 to get in and over. We'll do it easily. But yeah, I think Harry Brooks and Liam Livingstone needs to understand, or just spend a little more time with him and figure out how he does those chases.
But the very fact that England were chasing what they were chasing, not just in this particular game, but the kind of situations they found themselves in this tournament, the kind of winning situations, I think the one area you'd have to say soars above everything else is their death bowling. I know it might just sound as if we're trying to hammer a single point home, but these are the reasons why we're doing that. This is not figures that you see with every attack in the world. 23 for 6, 30 for 7, 36 for 3, 25 for 5. Michael, this is the kind of pressure that death bowling has put on, led by Sam Curran, assisted today by Mark Wood.
Yeah, they've become very good. I think Sam Curran's really the standout. I mean, Mark Wood's always been around, obviously when he's not been injured. And that extra bit of pace is very important. But Sam Curran's just got the gift of, again, being one step ahead of the batter, running up and just watching the batter and then just bowling the ball that's going to be the most difficult to hit, whatever the batter does in terms of his movement. So he's very smart and he enjoys it. I think you can really see that he's almost saying to the captain, come on, every time you need something, just give it me. I've got that kind of belief in my own ability now. I've done it quite consistently over the last few games. So keep giving me the ball. You go through periods in your career where you just believe that you can make things happen all the time, and he's going through that period. There'll be times where he isn't quite in that same confident mood, so England really have to maximise Sam Curran's bowling at the minute because he's clearly got a great method and a great belief in what he's trying to achieve. Looking at those figures, they don't lie over the course of 4 games, so whoever plays England in the semi-final, they almost have to rely on the fact that England will bowl pretty well at the death. They're not a team like they were a year ago where you could target England's death bowling. You almost used to wait for England's death bowling and then you could capitalise. Well, at the minute, I think you target England at the top end. I think you can get them in the first 6 and I think you can attack the spinners. And then you almost don't want to leave too much towards the back end because those numbers are quite consistent. England are a better death bowling team now than they are a starting team. And it used to be the opposite way around. So teams that play against England, they all have the data. Joy knows more than most that, all this data gets put into the system, into the computer. They all know everything. So if I was playing against England now, I'd go so hard at them, so hard early to make sure that they might have to bowl Sam Curran too earlier. So he's not got too many left in him because he's bowling so well. And just you've got to, teams that are really good dismantle the opposition in terms of tactics. You can't allow a good team to just deliver the same tactics game after game. You've got to try and dismantle it. And that's what I'll be looking to see, who plays England, what they do to try and counteract that.
Well, I know Michael says who plays England. Unless something ridiculous happens, India are playing England at the Adelaide Oval.
At the Adelaide Oval.
I didn't really want to mention that. I just didn't really want to.
Well, if that's the lesson, then we know who has to do what.
Yeah, and not only that, the Adelaide Oval the variety of other things will come up because square, shorter boundaries on the sides, so the Indian spinners won't have the kind of, as they say, Akshar Patel would have loved to bowl at somewhere like Sydney, but, that's not to be.
But yeah, Sam Curran, even the individual numbers say so. Those team numbers look ridiculous, ridiculously good, of course, from England's perspective, but Sam Curran's own numbers had been fabulous in the last few games. Even today, that one boundary that went, which was just off a sort of edge, that was the only little damage that was done to him in the entire...
Yeah, absolutely. And see, that's the thing. There's some great skills there. One is, if you're a left-arm bowler, the wide Yorker that you can drop in, you have an even better chance at it because you have the angle on the wide Yorker. So what happens is, he's managed to get that skill. And if you try watching wide Yorkers, left-arm bowlers, you'll see them getting called at least 1 out of 3 times they'll get called for a wide on the wide Yorker because it's a really tough skill to drop it because you've also got the angle. But if you get it in the right place, a left-hander's wide Yorker going from over the wicket is very difficult to hit. And I think he's perfected that. He's got that, then he goes round the wicket, he gives you different variations. So he's such a busy bowler and he's lifted a bit of pace as well. He was, 128, 130, 132. I think we saw a couple of balls which were 137, 138 as well. So he can just add a little bit of pace if he wants to. And interestingly, just look at it. He doesn't use as many slower balls as a lot of death bowlers use nowadays. The big thing is to use a lot of slow balls. He has a slow ball, he has a slow bouncer, but he saw the conditions. He didn't need to use it then, he didn't use it.
Well, we don't like to preempt in the game of cricket, but we're going with the assumption that things go according to plan on the final Super Sunday. England will have a few days to put their feet up and wait till that game in Adelaide on Thursday. But as and when it comes around, with what looks likely, Michael, to be India versus England, what are your expectations from that game? We've talked a lot about England's journey to the semi-final. It should be a cracker, India versus England at Adelaide.
Yeah, I mean, India have got to win tomorrow, yeah, haven't they?
They do. But let's just assume they've won. Let's just assume they're in the semis.
Yeah, just saying. Brilliant. That's what World Cups are all about. The group stages, you get these games, obviously, that happen between the big countries. But what we all want to watch and what we all tune in for cricket for really is the big semi-finals, the must-win games. Who can stand up to the pressure? The atmosphere in Adelaide will be immense. You've seen some England supporters in Sydney. I'm sure they'll get on the plane, but they'll be completely outnumbered by probably 30-1 by the Indian supporters. But they'll make some noise. They'll try and get behind the side. It'll be a great occasion, and you've got 2 sets of players that, I think most players in both sides are in pretty good form. There's 1 or 2 in each side that you could say, they've not done a great deal, they've not had great opportunities. You could argue England's engine room in the middle have not really done too much in the World Cup. 1 or 2 of the Indian batters, you could say, haven't done a great deal, but primarily 2 teams that have got the substantial amount of their players playing pretty good cricket. So it all comes down to who can play that special innings, because it generally is always one person that stands out above the rest in your team in terms of batting. And as a bowling unit, can the captains get the right combinations to the right players with the dimensions that Joy mentioned in Adelaide? It's just slightly different. So you have to just bowl a little bit into the surface sometimes to players, depending on which side of the boundary you're hitting. Generally, you go a bit fuller with the seamers and try and get them hitting down the ground because it's longer straight. But I just love it when it gets to, whether it's the IPL semis, finals or World Cup, I just love to see which players can just arrive and just play the game. Because it is just another game, but it's not. It's a game of cricket, but it's not. It's more. It's a semi-final of a World Cup. And I always look to see which players can play the semi-finals and when we get to the finals as if it is just another game of cricket. They're the ones that are special players, and only a small few can do that. And
just to finish off, Michael, on the possible personnel, we're not sure how serious the Malan injury is. Obviously, if they get it fixed in 5 days' time, it's fine. If not, do you reckon a Phil Salt gets straight in?
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Ben went to 3 and did well today, so you'd think that Ben Stokes would bat at 3. Phil Salt, his main success has come at the top of the order, but they could just slot him into that engine room and they could manoeuvre the order around depending on who's bowling in the matchups. Joy mentioned Harry Brook and Liam Livingstone. I agree with them. That was a perfect scenario today for Harry Brook to see England home and give himself a huge amount of confidence because he hadn't done a great deal in the World Cup. He was great in Pakistan and he's a great talent. Liam Livingstone, again, in big tournaments, he's yet to do something special with the bat for England. And I'm not saying, a special innings is 60 off 30 deliveries. That's the kind of player he is. But tonight, a special innings for Liam Livingstone would have been 18 not out off 16 and being there at the end shaking hands. That shaking hands moment, I can't tell you how important that is for players to be there at the end, seeing your team over the line And that was an opportunity missed by a few of those England players. But yeah, I think Salt will come in. I think it'll be a Salt from Milan. It doesn't look to me like Milan will be fit. You don't do a groin on, what day are we on? Saturday, and then are playing on Wednesday or Thursday. I don't think that'll be possible. So yeah, I think it'll be full Salt, right-hander in the middle, and he gives it a good old crash. A typical England white ball player.
Yep. There's the other possibility that maybe David Willey, because we've seen in at least in cricket in England, he's batted right up the order, so England could look at of throwing things around there. But yep, the team that will play no further part in this tournament are the home side. One of the pre-tournament favourites, the defending champions from a year ago. That's where we finish. Australia with an E next to their name. 7 points, but an inferior net run rate. Few moments they'll rue. Yes, there was a washout, but they could have easily lost that game. And of course, the Ireland game, they'll keep thinking about that. They had the opportunity to keep that net run rate up there, and maybe they wouldn't have had to do as much against Afghanistan to be ahead of England. So those little moments will come to haunt them. But Joy, in terms of just a post-mortem for Australia, playing on their home turf, I know in history of this tournament, home sides haven't exactly done well, but still.
No, look, my point is I still feel Australia was one of the strongest sides in the tournament. The two things that let them down, one was when you were down 70, 80 odd for 7-8, okay, old Australian teams would have taken it to a 140 or 150. They wouldn't have finished off, 100 runs short. I mean, that's something they capitulated. They were hit so hard, but they lost their nerve. But just the kind of shots that they hit towards the end, you're already 5, 6, 7 down, the kind of shots the end, and players like Pat Cummins, he's an Australian captain. I mean, he knows situations better than anyone else. So I think that's one thing they'll look at, saying our situational awareness was poor. And the second thing, which I've been saying for the longest time, again, I go back to it, this is an Australia that doesn't finish off teams. They didn't finish off Ireland, allowed the tail to wag and wag and wag, and Lorcan Tucker went and got 71 against them. Afghanistan, look how close they took it. I mean, Rashid Khan nearly took the game away from them. And those are the two things that they look at and say, that could we finish these games off? Why are we not finishing off games? That's not the Australian way. And I think somewhere there's a little bit of steel they need. Things have changed. Justin Langer was a very different kind of coach, and I think you have a different kind of culture now with Andrew McDonald coming in, a very different kind of culture. But sometimes perhaps you feel that they aren't as clinical about finishing off teams as they used to be. I don't think the personal is a problem. I think they're still a very, very talented side.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, definitely, if you look at that side on paper, if you were in opposition, you'd be possibly even scared. Warner and Finch and Maxwell and Stoinis, added Tim David to the mix. With the bowling lineup, you've got Cummins and Stark and Hazelwood and Zampa. So it just doesn't stop coming at you. And the solidity of a Mitch Marsh in the middle, Matthew Wade can hit the ball. There just didn't seem to be a weak link, yet they're out of the World Cup.
No, I mean, that's a World Cup winning side without any question. They've got everything required to win a World Cup. We saw that last year. I just didn't think they got the preparation right. The series against England, they just swapped and changed. Aaron Finch was in the middle. It was like, I didn't quite get that. You're only 2 or 3 games away from the World Cup. Surely you know your formation. You just stick to your positions within the side. So I didn't quite understand what Australia did going into the World Cup. They started so poorly. New Zealand caught them cold on that first game. You're always playing catch-up. I look at yesterday and the fact that Mitchell Stark wasn't selected in a must-win game in terms of not just win it, but winning it really well. And I heard from the coach, Daniel Vittori, that it was about Kane Richardson death bowling. I thought, well, wait a minute, if you're going to try and blow Afghanistan away, it's not going to come down to death bowling anyway. It's all about up-front bowling. So you need your best up-front bowlers. You need Mitchell Stark, who, all right, he's not been at his best, but we do know from Mitchell Stark's career that if he gets it right, he can get 4 quick wickets, 5 quick wickets in the space of 2 or 3 overs. So I didn't quite understand their thinking throughout the whole of the World Cup and just before. It is what it is. T20 cricket, it's small margins, little moments. But to start so poorly and then to allow Ireland to get so close to them, having them 6 down quite quickly, I think Joy's absolutely right. Australian sides of old would certainly have got 140, 150 against New Zealand and then have blown Ireland away for 80 or 90. That have just been ruthless. And that's why I look at this Australian group. I don't think they're quite as ruthless as some of the old teams. Maybe they're not quite as good, but I don't think they have that real ruthless. I remember playing against Steve Waugh's teams back in the early 2000s. It was horrible because they were ruthless. They were at you and they didn't give you an inch. And if they were on top of you, they just squashed you into the ground and didn't allow anyone in your side to do anything if they possibly could. I don't see that from this Australian team. I think they're quite a nice team to play against.
Yep, that's not something you normally say about Australia. Quite a nice team to play against. Pretty ruthless was what they needed to be, and they weren't. All the personnel, I didn't even mention Steve Smith when I made a list of those players. So on paper, they looked like winners. Well, on the field, they didn't quite manage to make it. I reckon, Michael, also that a few of the England boys will hunt down Lorcan Tucker and buy him a cold beverage.
Absolutely, yeah. There's always a few Irish bars in Sydney.
But yeah, that's as far as Australia are concerned. They're not going to play any further part. It's going to be India versus, it's going to be England. Let's not jump the gun yet, even though we've got Michael's thoughts on it. It's going to be England, guaranteed a spot at the Adelaide Oval on Thursday. Who will their opponents be? Well, there's plenty of cricket to play on Super Sunday. It's going to all begin with an early morning game. Well, morning in Australia, very early morning in India, when the Dutch take on South Africa, which should be a formality for South Africa just to assure their semi-final place in Sydney on Wednesday. But after that, a couple of games that could end up being significant. First, it's Bangladesh at the Adelaide Oval in the first of two games, game number 41. If they were to go on to win that, which they should go on to win it, then the only chance for them to qualify is to hope that India slip up later on against Zimbabwe. But let's stick to Pakistan and Bangladesh. This is how the other group is, and we'll come to Pakistan's group. They really have played cricket in patches that they would have been proud of, but they would have rude small moments, a little bit like Australia have, to particularly, of course, the end of the Zimbabwe game, and they should really have beaten India as well.
Should have beaten India. They showed their class against South Africa. You saw a little bit of why this Pakistan team is so highly rated. And when we were talking before the tournament, we were talking about great bowling sides. And, everyone was talking the two sides that stood out for us for South Africa and Pakistan, just in terms of the variety of the bowling and the kind of opportunities they had. I think Pakistan their bowlers haven't still done it. They did it against South Africa. But I think that may have been just a little bit too late at this point in the tournament. But I think they finally got their balance right. And, they'll be wondering and looking at themselves and saying, did we get it right too late? Did Mohammad Haris come in too late? I mean, the innings he played, he was absolutely explosive. I mean, then again, Iftikhar Ali, the kind of players that they have, they finally got some form out of them. But they'll just be wondering, well, it's too late. And it's not been, the other thing is, it's not been a great tournament for Babar Azam. I mean, he and Rizwan have just been missing. And normally you'd expect if they play 4 matches, at least one match, one of those two guys will win a match for you. It hasn't happened.
Yep, I was trying to find some area in rural Tamil Nadu where you could dial 0446 and get through to somebody in there. I couldn't quite find that. That, of course, is Babar Azam's World Cup so far, 0446. But I guess whether or not Pakistan get Zimbabwe to do them a favor, ironically, after the same team that beat them, they need to get Zimbabwe to beat India. Babar Azam would like to finish on a high, and of course, they need to beat Bangladesh.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of all the teams, Pakistan will be probably sitting in the hotel rooms with the most regrets, because they should have beaten India. They had that pretty much done and dusted, and they didn't. And they should beat Zimbabwe, and that's 4 more points through to the semi-final. So wouldn't even been contemplating tomorrow's game. So I do think they're a very, very good cricket team, and they're very dangerous. But that game against India was such a probably demoralising kind of moment for their mentality, because you played so well and you had it won. It was with 8 balls remaining. The game's in the hands of Pakistan. Then Virat produces magic, a bit of panic in that last over, and then you go to Zimbabwe, and for whatever reason, I said it at the time, England and Pakistan seem to be the two powerhouse cricket nations that do get beaten by lesser teams at World Cups. England have done it consistently over the years, and so have Pakistan. So there's something in there that, I don't know if it's a mentality, they just switch off, think it's a bit easy. I'm not too sure what it is, but Pakistan are very similar to England. Look at England losing to Ireland, but they've done that previously in World Cups, where they've just lost to teams that you kind of rock up and think, I'm going to win this game quite convincing. All of a sudden, you're like, oh no, it's going the other way. Pakistan are the same, but they're a good side, very, very dangerous. You just never know. You never know what may happen tomorrow. Zimbabwe have got a group of players that I don't think are good enough to beat India. but I didn't think Ireland could beat England either, and I didn't think Zimbabwe could beat Pakistan. So I'm not making too many predictions, but I think Pakistan, of all the sides in this World Cup, I think they're the ones that'll be sitting back thinking, yeah, we should have got to the semi-finals.
Yeah, it's like the old cliche we used to always say, which Pakistan will turn up? And I think a bit of that has happened in this tournament. Never mind the India-Pakistan game, that was a classic, but the Zimbabwe game was the Pakistan that, from a Pakistan fan's point of view, you don't want to see. And then the game against South Africa, they would be wishing that's the lot that turned up every single day.
Yeah, I was just wondering, again, look at it, why was Mohammad Haris, I mean, you just look at the way he played, why wasn't he there earlier? Why wasn't the Iftikhar given his record in Australia? I mean, he's had a fantastic record in Australia, and he just wasn't given opportunities up the order. And I think those are the two things they'll be looking at, and their bowling has done well towards the end, and obviously Shadab Khan has done fantastically for them. So I think this is a complete side. Now they know what their right team is. Now their business is to go and finish this last game on a high and hope India stumbles.
And, well, Bangladesh as well is going to be the opposition for Pakistan. Let's have a quick look at the Bangladesh squad. We know all, I mean, they're going to think back to that game against India and see, just like we talked about Pakistan versus India, Bangladesh had that huge opportunity, Joy. They really should have. I mean, the rain certainly stopped them, but the way they were going, the way Litton was going.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing. The kind of start they had, India showed some character in the way they held their nerve, because, everyone was talking about the rain actually stopping the concentration of the players. The rain was good for Bangladesh because it made the job even tougher for India, because the lesser number of overs you got to control it in, the more difficult it is, because the batsmen can take more risks because there's less overs to play. So I think they would be looking at themselves and wondering, once Litton had gone, and Litton went out to something that you can't do. That was an absolutely explosive feat of fielding by KL Rahul. But the rest of them would be asking themselves, what did they try and do? And players like Afif Hussain, Yasir, they're all talented players, especially Afif. They have that ability there. And of course, Shakib has done nothing for them in this tournament. I mean, he's a class player, but perhaps, as I said, this is not his greatest format. He tries to, and when he tries to finally hit the ball, he always inevitably is finding a fielder right now. It's one of those things that happen. And I think this Bangladesh team is still a very good team. And I think Litton and Afif, Taskin, they have some pieces out there which are the pieces for a very good side in the future.
Yeah, their fielding has been a big positive. Not much at stake for Bangladesh, again, other than what was at stake for Afghanistan against Australia, for Sri Lanka against England. Bit of pride and just try and give their fans, and there's a lot of travelling fans that go and watch Bangladesh play. So I guess Pakistan, if anything, will have to watch out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Be a great atmosphere, great crowd, great support for both teams. I thought Bangladesh against India were excellent. I thought they put up a really good show. Litton Das was magnificent. The rain came. I thought the DLS was a little bit dubious. I didn't understand quite the numbers that were created after that, but it is what it is. And, India win the game. Bangladesh, I think if they look back at the whole performance in the World Cup, and they've been in quite a few World Cups now, I think they'll be disappointed. I think they could have played better. I think that they're a better team than what we've seen in this World Cup. I thought that the performance against India was the performance I would expect on a regular basis from Bangladesh. I think that's the kind of side that they need to become in a more consistent side. There are games that they play and you think, oh yeah, that's a good team with a good amount of skill and some good kind of presence out in the middle. And then there's times when you watch them and you think, oof, they kind of lost what they had in the previous game. So hopefully, I saw in that game against India a Bangladesh side that's just found a little bit of rhythm of play, and they'll take it into tomorrow's game against Pakistan. It'll be a good contest, but I expect Pakistan to beat them.
Certainly would. Let's just quickly have a look at the points table and why we're referring to the final Super Sunday. All these teams on 4, they got to finish on 5. That's the number of games played. So all 6 teams in Group 2 will be in action. Triple header, South Africa take on Netherlands, then it's Pakistan, Bangladesh, and then the final game of the league stage will be India taking on Zimbabwe, which at one stage in the tournament when the qualifiers were on was looking like India versus the West Indies in terms of seeding. It's not. The West Indies are back home. It's India versus Zimbabwe, and all to play for. There's nobody who expects Zimbabwe to beat India. How will India's approach be to this game? Because they've got to treat Zimbabwe like an opposition who can beat them.
Yeah, I think India, though, will look at it positively because we've just had a situation where they had a match which was almost going out of their hands. That Bangladesh match was, India was really had their back to the wall, and that was possibly an elimination match. And they fought their way back. They held their nerve. They came this far. I think they feel that they've got a chance out now. I think this win has given India a lot. I mean, the first win, of course, gave India a lot. Then South Africa, what happened with South Africa must have just dampened the spirits a bit. But I think they're up again, and I think this is a game that they'll take very seriously. This is a very professional side. I think they're going to go for it full tilt.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's the approach that you always talk about. And sometimes you can be on a high pillar to post kind of thing if you take a racehorsing analogy. But it's not been that for India. And I don't think they'd mind that.
No, but I think at this stage it's about peaking at the right time. That's what gets you to winning the World Cup. And India have got the perfect chance tomorrow to get all their processes right in terms of the way that they want to play, be aggressive with the bat. They've got great skill levels with the ball, be really dynamic in the field. And if they play in that kind of way, it takes it into the semi-final on Thursday. One thing's for sure in the semi-final on Thursday, I think I think teams know you've got to play really well to beat England. So you've got to get all your processes in place, and that's what India. I thought they played okay against Bangladesh. I thought it was pretty good with the bat. They had a moment with the ball where it got a bit messy because of Litton Das. He played wonderfully against them, but to beat the really good sides in the semi-finals, pretty much everything has to be in place. And tomorrow is a great chance for India to put that all in place, get aggressive with the bat, be aggressive in the field, and get the combinations right with the ball in hand, and then get on the plane to Adelaide and produce it again in the semi-finals. So. They know exactly what they need to do, and players. It's not about just having time in the middle. That's for Test match cricket, 50-over cricket. T20 cricket is the process of to be aggressive, and how you're going to get the boundaries, how you're going to get that strike rate up, and it's not about you as an individual to just spend a little bit of time in the middle to find a little bit of form and rhythm. T20 cricket doesn't allow you that. So India aren't far away, and they kind of got to this position, and they will get to the semi-finals. I'm pretty sure about that. And it might be their year because they're a good enough team. I look at 5 teams and you just think, England, New Zealand, Australia, I think Pakistan as well, or 6, South Africa and India. They've all got good enough teams and squads to win the World Cup without any question. It's just a matter of can they produce it at that moment. And, for India, it'll be tomorrow, get the team playing well. And then can you produce it in a semi and can you produce it in a final?
Perfect tune-up for 2 potential knockout games. At, of course, first up at Adelaide and then back to Melbourne. Quickly, before we go back to Zimbabwe, a look at the India squad. Do we suggest any possible changes here? Are they going to look at this lineup purely for this game, or are they going to say, let's get our best 11 for Thursday, or do you don't want to preempt and look ahead?
Look, I think what they did last time was saying that Deepak Hooda was the aberration. They changed it for a very specific situation, changed it with a lot of left-handers in the team for a particular situation. And I think this is the team they have said, clearly stated from the start, they want to play. That means they're going to go with, that means no Rishabh Pant, Karthik over Rishabh Pant. And I think Akshar Patel is their first choice over Deepak Hooda. And I think they're planning to, unless something dramatic changes, this is the template that they've got. And I'm happy with that, because if they've chosen this and they've, gone through with this, it's rather that they don't make any changes now. This is the template that they know that they've played with. Let them stick to consistency. And I think that's one of the things that Dravid wants to bring to this team. Consistency in selection, clear mind, clarity. You're just focusing on the ground. You're not wondering, they'll swap me tomorrow or what. Everyone knows their roles. This is what we have to do. These are the 11 who are going to do it.
Well, that's what we expect, whether or not they make changes against England. What about Zimbabwe? They've had their moments in the tournament. They certainly, I know Michael mentioned about Pakistan being the one team that will sit with the most amount of regret, but Zimbabwe had reached the stage in the tournament after beating Pakistan, the way they were placed against Bangladesh before that Shakib al-Hasan run out, that they could have actually been semi-final contenders. They would have been playing the game against India with more points than India in the bank.
Absolutely. It was that close. It's one of those things that they look at and they'll wonder, how did we actually manage to mess that up? And they had a great opportunity. I think this has been a great run for them. And, under Dave Houghton, Zimbabwe cricket was really in the doldrums 2 years back. They've come back strong. They have a lot of young players, but they've got to make the maximum of this tournament because, the kind of attack they have, Blessing Muzarabani, Nagawavra, all these players suit these conditions. Okay, they have to make the most of it here. Because, once you go back to Asia or you go back to the subcontinent, you're not going to get conditions like this. But for these conditions, this is a fairly decent team. And I think Sikandar Raza is playing absolutely outstanding cricket for them.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the 11 selects itself. They had they'd left Brad Evans out for Luke Jongwe in the last game. Brad Evans was outstanding against Pakistan. But I think their first 11 pretty much selects itself, and they'll just say more of the same, led by the inspiration that is Sikandar Raza.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think, I'm amazed actually the teams make so many changes in the World Cup. There's only a small few games, unless it's tactical or dimensions of the ground which make you want another left-hander or a different style of bowler because of it. But most teams generally stay consistent. They're a pretty good side, Zimbabwe. I thought that the performance against Pakistan were excellent. I hope they can get back to. I mean, I remember back in the day when the Flower brothers and Guy Whittle, they had a team that was very powerful, Heath Streak, and hopefully in time they can get back to being a side that is to that level. I think they're dangerous. I think they've got players that are hugely talented, but they just don't get that many opportunities. That last performance will disappoint them. The last performance was a real poor performance, and that'll disappoint them. But they've got the big fish tomorrow. They've got India. Can they produce a bit of magic? It's a massive stage for all these individual players. You just never know against India. If you, as an individual, produce a bit of magic, you don't know where it could end up. You don't know whether suddenly the phone rings and one of these franchises. I don't know when's the auction. December what?
16th.
16th of December. So you get into that stage now that if you do something special, whoever you are, individually at this time of year with that auction, you never know, you might get a phone call. So all those Zimbabwe players should be going out there, giving it a good go. And you just never know, the phone might ring.
I love it when Michael puts his agent hat on, ever so often. Every time there's an individual performing, he's thinking like an agent and who's going to be calling them. But what would you rather do if you were Zimbabwe? You remember talking about Afghanistan and saying that, you've got to do what the other side may want you to do. But if that gives you the best chance to let them go.
Look, if you're Zimbabwe, I'd bat first. I'd bat first because inexperienced sides that don't play that much international cricket. I'm not saying Zimbabwe is not a test nation, but they don't play that much cricket. Set a target, whatever it is. You have very decent bowlers. Then you need your batsmen to play without wondering about, this is how much I need to chase. That kind of calibration, as he says, somebody like a Ben Stokes is also very rare because there are not too many players who can think that through very clearly. Good chasers are very rare. Let them go bat with a free mindset. They would probably say, let's set 150, 160. And then, get a couple of wickets early and see where we can do the Indians. So I would bat first if I was Zimbabwe.
Well, before we give the Joy Factor question away, Michael, you can take the agent hat off, put on a fortune teller's hat for the moment, take us forward to Adelaide on Thursday. India and England have got to that semi-final. Give us a prediction for that result from head, heart, both.
I said England will make the final from the start. I thought they would play Australia, but I'm going to back England. I think they're, in terms of all-round ability and experience, I think Milan's a big miss for them, so that's a bit of a blow. But I'm going to back England to beat India on Thursday. Sorry, everyone on social media. I'm only just going with what I feel like. I don't want any abuse. I just think England have just started to play against New Zealand. They had a little bit of I wouldn't say a panic, but they made it, quite difficult today with the batting hand. But they're just starting to peak at the right time, which is a good sign.
I don't think a lot of people would mind that. I mean, you've got to go with what your gut says, what your heart says. And at the end of the day, the fans, even the most ardent fans, will take the result that finally comes. Joy, the Joy Factor question for the day.
Absolutely. And, this is to do with Reginald Foster, as you know, he held a record which has been, from 2017, been held by an Indian. The record is an interesting one. We all know about it. It's the biggest difference between highest and second highest test score. Karan Nair holds it from then on, 303 and 26. Tip Foster got 287 on debut, which is a big question everyone knows about. Highest test runs scored in debut, 287, Tip Foster. I think his next highest was 56. He never got above that. But Karun Nair, obviously, the only reason that he's held this record, this is the one record you could lose. He could come back into the team. He's still a young man. Hopefully, this record will go back to Reginald Foster.
Yes, he'd love to have that record. I mean, there's some records you take and you say, you can have it back anytime. Well, it's been quite a journey from the start till now. We've identified, two of the semi-finalists for sure. There's a couple more who virtually are in there, but virtual is not as good as being there. So we need to tune in tomorrow to find out exactly what happens when Sunday is completed. South Africa with a chance, India with a chance to be in there, and Pakistan only in with a chance if somebody else allows them. Well, let's also give you the Joy Factor winner for today, the one who spotted the Karun Nair question. And it's our good friend. There you go. Parth's back. Hello, Parth. How are you doing? Well done again. We probably had this question answered a few times in different quizzes, but this was asked in a very different way through the route of Tip Foster. Well, with that winning announcement, that's all we have on the show. Thank you very much for all your thoughts throughout the tournament, Michael Vaughan.
Cheers, guys.
And good luck for the semi-final on Thursday.
Yeah, good luck. Hope the best team win, and hope that team has got 3 lines on their chest.
There you go. Which animal will roar? Thank you, Joy, for your thoughts. We'll see you again. And all of you, thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon. That's all we have on Cricbuzz Live.